Welcome into the Missouri on SI post-game show. I'm Joey Van Zummeren. He's Michael Stamps, two of your Missouri football reporters. We're here at Faurot Field after Missouri's 27-21 win over Boston College. A really important win for this Missouri Tigers team. As we talked about going into this week, is going to be the toughest challenge they face early on in this season, especially compared to Buffalo and Murray State. And they definitely got to fight. They definitely had to fight for this win. And it was a well-deserved one that they wrapped up. Michael, your first thoughts on this game?
Yeah, well, first off, I mean, obviously, biggest test of the year so far. Obviously, only 3 weeks into the season, but based on what I saw from Boston College, I think this might be one of the best teams the Tigers end up facing all year.
Wow.
Yeah, and I obviously know it's a tough SEC schedule, but that offensive line looked really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, Missouri defense wasn't setting a ridiculous amount of pressure towards Castellanos because if you make him escape the pocket, that causes a wide variety of issues. But they, obviously they did a good job keeping him contained. But the offensive line didn't let much get to him. I think Castellanos wasn't perfect, which is kind of I don't want to say a key factor for the outcome of this game because obviously Missouri played pretty well, but I mean he did not have a flawless game at all. He had under 20 rushing yards, which is kind of the name of the game for him, and they started off with some designed runs and things like that, and they worked really well. That first drive, obviously, the first drive in most football games is pretty scripted, but that first quarter kind of bled into that second quarter, first 25 minutes of the game or so.
Right.
Castellanos looked good, and then Missouri figured things out, and he quieted down a little bit. He missed a couple throws, obviously, 2 interceptions. Don't know. Those weren't incredible throws by any means, so those are on him.
Mm-hmm.
I believe just reading our colleagues over on the Boston College site, Castellanos even came out and said he felt like he was the reason that they lost that game. That he felt the Missouri defense didn't do anything too crazy, which I think there's points for and against that.
Yep.
But I think that's another thing. If Castellanos plays to his full abilities, like what we've seen against Florida State, and obviously they demolished Duquesne last weekend. But if he plays to his fullest capabilities, then that changes the outcome of the game.
Yeah.
And obviously the two running backs too, Ward and Robichaud didn't get much going on the ground either. So they didn't have a flawless game. The defense didn't play great, but if they played to their fullest capabilities, if we're looking at a closer team and obviously weaker ACC conference, that might be a team who could contend. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is one of the better teams Missouri faces all year.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one of the things you mentioned there with stopping Castellanos is the fact that on that first drive there, they had a few RPOs that Castellanos mainly, most of those took down and ran. He did it on the very first play of the game, got 7 yards on it. It looked like, okay, he's as advertised with his elusiveness, with his speed. But then Missouri defense really adjusted well. And I think that's one of the main stories from this game. The fact how this Mizzou team responded, how they adjusted after a first quarter where the defense was allowing a lot of big plays. They obviously have that one early in the second quarter where it's a bad snap. Castellanos recovers it though, and of course, all 11 guys on defense from Missouri are chasing after him, and he tosses up easy 67-yard touchdown. They have those struggles. The offense has plenty of struggles in the first quarter as well. Even on special teams, Joseph Charleston getting an unsportsmanlike 15-yard penalty. So they have all these struggles. They adjust, though. They adjusted on defense to be able to stop Castellanos. They adjust on offense to really get things going. They finally, for the first time all season, get quite a few explosive plays, mostly thanks to Luther Burden, who had a big game. So story out of this game has to be that Mizzou was able to adjust, able to respond. As we heard from Eli Drinkwitz talking after this game, a really, more than anything else, just important game for Missouri to face this early in the season before they head into SEC play with a tough Vanderbilt team. Let's get into some of the more specific sides. Starting with the offense here. Productive day for the offense, obviously 27 points, and really were able to find the rhythm again after Burden gets that 44-yard reception on that second drive there, and they only end up settling for a field goal on that drive, but they went on a 21-0 run after Trevez Johnson gets his interception, which felt like a big turning point, and hard to pick apart too many flaws. And back to the point about adjusting on that first drive, they had a lot of miscommunications. It seemed like they were a little bit overwhelmed by what Boston College was doing on the defensive line. They adjusted that. Brady Cook has most of the clean pocket for the rest of the game. Obviously, Donovan Ezra, who was a problem throughout it, but solid game from this Missouri offense. I would say, you know, I said a little bit ago, hard to find too many flaws, but there was plenty throughout the whole game. However, even considering the competition against Vanderbilt and Murray State, I feel like this was the best we've seen this Missouri offense all year.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I sent out a tweet earlier in the game, that first offensive drive from Missouri looked almost perfect until it wasn't. But there was like three chunk plays right in a row coming from Noel, and I can't remember who had the reception off the top of my head, but there was some early stuff that looked promising, and obviously they kind of stalled out. And you made a good point. Boston College, I don't know exactly what they were doing special, but Missouri looked flustered. I remember we haven't seen any issues with Connor Tolson and snapping the ball. There was a obvious miscommunication with Tolson and Brady Cook that led to Noel having to fall on the ball, lost a couple yards. I think my biggest takeaway offensively is that Luther Burden finally looked like Luther Burden tonight. And not to say he wasn't 100%. Obviously, he was sick last week and didn't get much run, but he looked like himself. I don't think I need to explain to anyone how impressive his touchdown was. That is what he's known for.
Yep.
And I was also really thoroughly impressed with his other. I think it was a 38-yard reception that led to that Brady Cook rushing touchdown, which was also impressive in itself. But Burden was super patient. He sat behind that block and kind of snuck through that hole. That's the type of thing that he is exactly known for. And I think it was probably refreshing for some Missouri football fans who were finally, they were looking for their star to start a show out, and he did exactly that today. And I've said this, I think I said this last week. Brady Cook is not the type of quarterback that is going to force the ball to Luther Burden or to whoever has the hot hand. He's going to get the ball to the open guy. He got the ball to Luther Burden today because he was open, and Burden did a good job creating for himself. That's what he's known for. So it wasn't like Cook was forcing it to Burden. They just had the connection going, and Burden was able to get the ball early and often, and then create plays for himself. I think another notable thing is obviously the running game. Nate Noel deserves a ton of credit for how well he played played today. Excuse me. And I think kind of the general consensus that it was going to be a split room, and obviously Carroll got some touches today, and I think Jamal Roberts was in on a couple snaps. I don't know if he had any carries or not, but I think Nate Noel had 22 carries or 22. somewhere around that range. So he's almost turning into a bit of a workhorse. And I know it was kind of a hot hand thing today, and that probably is what led into the amount of carries that Noel finished with. But I think he had 118 yards, and he finally busted off a couple big plays. He had a big catch in the first half as well. So Nate Noel looked incredible. Didn't score any points, but man, he was very good.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he talked about after the game some of the open holes he had for them that the offensive line created, and just smiling through it all.
Yeah, he was a happy guy, wasn't he?
Sure, for sure. And then I mean, smiling about obviously it was a sellout for the first two games of the season, but then to have a crowd out here for all four quarters, obviously it was a great atmosphere here today. Third downs were incredibly loud, especially at the start and end of the game. I can see why Eli Drinkwitz, he said on Tiger Talk radio show this week that for defensive third downs, Mizzou has had to not use the in-helmet communication and go back to sideline communication. Like that was, I can definitely see why. And again, with Noel, like you said, a lot of carries today, but he deserved that after the first 3 or 4 carries he had.
Yes,
was pretty evident that
absolutely
he was going to have a big day. Like you mentioned about Burden, 6 receptions, 117 yards. And again, just so many plays where you really saw what makes him so special, his elusiveness, just being a human joystick. And I mean, like you said, he had some big plays in the first 2 weeks of the season, had some flashes. Obviously, exited last game early, but this is the first really consistent showing from Luther Burden this season. Let's move on to the defensive side of things. Again, this was the first stint of putting the Missouri defense. Of course, they were going to allow points at some point in the season. They weren't going to go 12 straight shutouts, but 21 points allowed to Boston College, especially the way Boston College started, where they had a 14-3 lead. It looked like, okay, this might, like, it seemed like Boston College could have got out to a really hot start, and I mean they did, but it looks like they were going to extend it until Trevez Johnson gets that easy interception. Then Drayden Norwood gets a key interception later in the game as well, so they get those takeaways, put pressure on Castellanos. Khalil Jacobs had a sack. Johnny Walker had a really impressive tackle for loss too. And yeah, I mean, like we were talking about earlier, put a lot of pressure on Castellanos where he wasn't able to run as much. Michael, what were your thoughts about this defense
Yeah,
performance?
I mean the takeaways were obviously huge, especially Johnson's was those were game changing plays.
Mhm.
Obviously, I personally I think I credit those more to not great
Yeah, for
decisions from
sure.
Castellanos. Then Johnson did make a good play on the ball, so I'll
Yeah.
give him that. Drayden Norwoods was pretty much right to him.
Yeah.
Which I mean goes to show the pressure they're putting on the quarterback and that sort of thing. So it's not like I'm just completely discrediting the defense. I think obviously one of the biggest flaws or errors we saw on the defense side of the ball, there were two plays that were just you could not be more wide open if you're Reed Harris or Kamani Morales, I believe, their tight end who scored in the fourth quarter. You cannot be more wide
Yeah.
open than those two were, and we'd have to go back and watch it. I don't exactly remember off the top of my head what exactly the case was. I know the first one, the 67-yarder to Reed Harris, was kind of a weird, muffed
Yeah.
snap, and I think there were some communication issues on both sides. So I don't exactly know what happened there and what led to him being as wide open as a human being could possibly be on a football field. But those are errors that you have to correct.
Yep.
You have to correct heading into SEC play because other teams are going to Obviously, they did capitalize and score, but that's going to be a momentum builder for teams better than Boston College.
Yeah.
Which, obviously, they're a great team. I think it's important to note that there were these two wide open touchdowns, right, which are unbelievably just not okay, busted plays, and they still had flashes and they were still able to win.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important takeaway that even not just on the defensive side of the ball, just in the game in general. I think the first thing that Coach Dinkwitz said in his press conference is that it was not a pretty game and this is not their best football, and they were still able to beat a top 25 team in the country, a team that's going to compete in their conference. So not just on the defensive side of the ball, but generally, I think the fact that you're able to walk away with a win, not playing your best football against a team as good as Boston College, this early in the season is impressive. It's going to have to get better. No one expects them to be perfect this early in the year. This is the time you get to work out your kinks and kind of figure out what your spots of weakness are and where you need to improve. It's the case for everybody. Nobody is expected to play their best football yet this year, but to walk away with a win this early in the season and have some defensive errors like that is impressive. I think this is kind of more what people expected from this Missouri team heading into this year, a high-powered offense with Burden doing his thing and Nate Noel running on the ground and a whole bunch of people contributing on the offense, and the defense maybe had a couple more question marks. So this is maybe a little bit more people expected. I think there's definitely now we know maybe what those flaws or weaknesses on the defense are, and those are going to be things we have to keep an eye on as we progress.
As Eli Drinkwitz said last week, this team is far off from 100%, and that should be an exciting thing for this team. Before we wrap it up, two more things we want to talk about. First off, the conversation we've had each of these first 3 weeks, and we're gonna have this the last non-conference game before they have that random UMass game after Texas A&M, but from this game specifically, what did we learn about this team? I mean, the main storyline that like we've talked about a lot of times is that they were able to respond, recover from their own mistakes, from their own self-inflicted wounds. I guess I'd also add to that of what we learned of the ability to play complementary football. I asked Nate Noel about it, and he said that during the game, when each side had their struggles, the offense was telling the defense after they let up that bad 6-7-yard touchdown, the offense was telling the defense, don't worry, we got your back. We're going to score a touchdown here. Now, he humorously said that the offense didn't end up fulfilling that promise, but they each drive, after each mistake for each side of the ball, the other side was sure to still be there for them on the sideline, tell them that they're going to follow up with a better performance. And, he attributed that to the brotherhood, the chemistry on this team. And I think it all plays together. Michael, what did you learn about this?
I'm going to piggyback exactly off what you said. You took the words out of my mouth. The togetherness of this team is so obvious. Noel said something to the effect of, after a bad drive or after they scored their first 14 points, they weren't worried about the score. They're worried about each other, making sure they're lifting each other up and that sort of thing. I think like you said, the brotherhood and the togetherness of this team is clear, and obviously they all like each other, right? So that's a good thing. And once the wheels start, the wheels start turning and things start clicking, and they're really playing at that high level, I think that's going to be put in the light even more. So yeah, I think there's a lot of things we can take away. I don't know if this is the biggest takeaway, but he deserves a shout out. Blake Craig
Yeah.
was remarkable today, and I'm not even talking about 55 yards. Obviously, that's great and extremely impressive. But I think those first two field goals, in the first half were really huge to just keeping some life into the Missouri offense and the crowd in general. I mean, obviously, there's not a huge difference between 14-0 and 14-6, but you're still keeping it within one score. And let's say Blake Craig misses one of those field goals, it's 14-3, and
Right.
you're not able to get that 2-point conversion with Noel, and it's tied. So those two field goals, I think, did keep them hanging on by. They kept them hanging on by a thread a little bit, which I think was super important, to just staying one score away. But yeah, like I mentioned before, and you as well, the togetherness, the brotherhood of this team is clear. Even when we see him celebrating on the sidelines, I retweeted something. It was Khalil Jacobs in the celebration with Johnny Walker and Eddie Kelly after his sack, and that just made my day. So it's clear these guys are clearly playing for one another, and I think that's going to continue. That's going to be a feeling that continues to grow as we go along.
We got about 10 more minutes before they kick us out of this press box. So we'll be brief with this last one. Our key CNS from the game, we mentioned a lot of them: Burden, Noel, Travis Johnson, Drayden Norwood, all making big plays. You mentioned Blake Craig there as well. To pick one astray from that, I don't know if I would say Brady Cook is my main standout performer from this game. I don't know if I'd even say he's top 5, but I guess I would highlight his performance and just an example of taking what the defense gives him. That's what Drinkwitz talked about early in this week, having a disciplined approach on offense. And so took what the defense gave him. He still wasn't able to connect on a deep pass to Theo Weiss. I believe he had another one to Marquise Johnson I was able to connect on. So hasn't quite knocked that down yet. But again, I think the best performance of the season from Brady Cook, and we'll see how he progresses throughout the season. In the first quarter, not looking great. Had a few errant passes, had two specifically that to Mookie Cooper that ended drives, but we'll see, how he can get back on track for 2024. Michael, you're another standout performer.
Yeah, we mentioned him a little bit. I'm going to go with Khalil Jacobs. Definitely not, one of the biggest names. I think obviously that sack brought a lot of life into the Missouri defense, and just something to get the crowd energized again, just lift some spirits and continue that momentum. Excuse me. He also had a tackle on Castellanos. It was on third and 9, and I think third and something, and left him with 4th and 1. There was some open field ahead of Castellanos. If he doesn't get that little heel clip tackle, who knows what Castellanos is able to bust off. Obviously, he is electric, and you don't want to let him into the open field. That was a huge, big play saving tackle from Khalil Jacobs. That's not going to get enough attention as we talk about this stuff post game and days to follow. So he made two key plays. He finished with 3 tackles total. Obviously, the sack and the tackle for loss. So he made 2 key plays, and I think he deserves a little bit more attention.
All right, that's all we have for you from Faroe Field. We'll be back next week when they face Vanderbilt. Until then, be sure to tune into all of our coverage at Missouri on SI after this game and leading next week, and we appreciate you tuning in.